Hi everyone, welcome back to the 21 and Sensory podcast with me, Emily. I'm really excited to chat to today's special guest, Rachel Morgan Trimmer. Rachel does many things, including being an international keynote and TEDx speaker, also being a neurodiversity consultant and trainer, whilst also being an entrepreneur and an author. Rachel founded Sparkle Class in 2019, which has since rebranded to Firebird. Firebird is a company that delivers training on how to create an inclusive workplace and society for people living with ADHD, dyslexia, autism and dyspraxia. The team is made up of a combination of trainers and consultants, and companies get the benefit of both their lived and professional experience when they deliver training. Firebird have worked with clients such as the BBC, NHS, HP and the British Academy, to name a few. So I am very excited to chat to Rachel about everything she does. So Rachel, would you like to say hello?
Hello.
Thank you so much for being up for coming on my podcast and for reaching out to me, which is really nice.
Thank you for having me.
No worries. So I think what we'll do, because I feel like there's a lot to talk with you about, just because you do so many things. I think let's start by discussing your diagnoses that you have and kind of when you were diagnosed. I think it's always a good starting place.
Yeah, sounds good. So I first identified with having ADHD when I was about 23. I was sitting on a beach next to the Pacific Ocean when I first read a list of ADHD traits that I could relate to, because previously I thought it was just something that affected kids and needed to be medicated. And I read that, but I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 48.
Wow.
So
okay.
Yeah,
bit of a gap.
it was a big long wait, and I think being a woman had a lot to do with that, because every time I spoke to someone, I said, I think I might have ADHD. I was just brushed off. Why do you think you have that? And you can't have ADHD because you can memorize things, and people just didn't understand ADHD, I think, and so it took a lot of work on my part and a little bit of amount of luck to get that ADHD diagnosis. The autism identification came later. I like to recognise that we have to self-diagnose before we get a formal diagnosis, and it's not like, people say I got my diagnosis like someone handed it to them or they just picked it up in the middle aisle at Aldi. It's actually a lot of work behind the scenes to get that diagnosis, to come to that place of understanding first and self-diagnose. Then, if you wish to go down the route of formal diagnosis. So with autism, I was in my late 30s when I first started to think that I might be autistic, and I got my diagnosis at 46.
Okay. So again, a bit of a gap between kind of you first sort of thinking about it to being diagnosed with it.
Yes, I think I talked about other people doubting me, and I think a lot of us in those situations doubt ourselves too. Can I really be autistic? Do I really have ADHD? Doesn't everybody do that? Especially if we're from neurodivergent families where our traits or our characteristics or our behaviour is not seen as particularly odd.
Or even kind of from a parent point of view, you're just kind of described as like, oh, that's Emily, or oh, that's just Rachel. Like, I feel like it just becomes like that's a them thing, whereas actually it can be more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of our traits, as many people who are late diagnosed will understand, a lot of our traits are put down to negative personality qualities. How many of us have been called weird or awkward or lazy is a big one for ADHD, told we don't try hard enough, and so on.
Yeah, definitely. And so when you say that you kind of, when the different ages that you got formally diagnosed, was this something that you did through the NHS or was it something that you pursued privately?
My autism diagnosis was through the NHS and through a slightly unusual route. I had had my second child and I was suffering postnatal depression. So I was sent to a counsellor because the pathway for postnatal depression is different from a standard one. You get referred quicker.
Okay.
When I went to the counsellor, they said that my presentation was too complex for them. So they stepped me up to I'm not quite sure what they call it, level 3 or something. It's just kind of for more severely mentally ill people or more complex cases. So I went to see a therapist on the NHS who was very good. And I mentioned to him that I thought I might be autistic. And he actually referred me to the autism pathway rather than a GP or somebody doing it. I tried going through GP routes. I tried the private route actually with autism. And it just, I can't remember the details. I think I was put off not just by the cost, but by the standard. I thought, when you get to a place where you think, if I'm paying for this, I expect to be treated a little bit better.
Right. Okay.
And there was the issue that I couldn't get a dual diagnosis as well, because I thought if I'm paying for this, I want people who A, understand presentations in women, and B, understand a dual presentation of ADHD and autism.
Mm-hmm.
For the ADHD diagnosis, I went down a different route, and that was because of my job. So I did mention that luck played a part. Because of my job, I was asked to secret shop a process for ADHD referral and diagnosis by an associate. So it was a private service that I didn't have to pay for. It's different for everyone. And I know, there's problems with waiting lists and things like that, and it can be very frustrating. With the therapist one, I didn't mention that between him referring me and me actually getting that assessment, there was about 2 years.
Right. Okay. So the fact that even you were referred for a different route didn't mean that you potentially got any higher in a waiting list or anything like that.
Yes, I apologise if I didn't explain that quite quickly. The speed part was the postnatal depression service, and it was that led me eventually to the autism one. And I think while my experience is unique, it highlights some myriad different ways and sometimes the complexity of the route from, first understanding neurodiversity, then suspecting you might have it, then the self-diagnosis, then the often complicated and time-consuming process of finding out how you can get diagnosed, where to go, who's going to refer you, where they're going to refer you to, waiting lists, this, that, and the other. Most people I speak to go via their GP, which is the standard route. So I mentioned that my route was a little bit unusual, but I just wanted to highlight that unusual routes can be part of the picture.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned about not having a great experience GP wise. Was that kind of your first sort of port of call, like going through the GP, and were they dismissive? What happened?
I think that the first person I mentioned it to was the ADHD anyway, was in my late 20s. I was seeing a psychiatrist because I've had serious mental health issues on and off throughout my life. And so I ended up in the psychiatrist's office for that. And I mentioned this, and he was the first person to dismiss me. And I actually left the appointment because I just had enough.
Excellent.
Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't say ADHD, I don't know what does. If someone gets massively dysregulated and leaves, that should have been a tick right there. And then, with the GP route, there were a couple of times I mentioned it, and it just didn't really go anywhere. And I can't really remember why, to be honest, because it's sometimes when we try to remember these things, you can't really see a linear path. You just see a big tangle. And you can't, especially for people who've experienced trauma like I have, your memory is not always as clear as you would like it to be. So when I try and think of those things, it's just sort of a big confusing pile of sitting in offices and GP surgeries and bits of paper and forms to fill in and another form to fill in and so on. When I did the ADHD one, they sent me 4 forms to fill in, and I was thinking, have you met anyone with ADHD before? Why are you doing this?
That's not good, is it?
It's not at all. And one of them was the developmental something questionnaire. And this is something that puts people off getting a diagnosis. It's for normally parents to fill in about you as a kid. And some people think that's that's mandatory, and it's not, because I didn't want my parents involved in my diagnosis. So I just said, I'm either not doing it, or you can answer the questions yourself. What did people say about you when you were a child? What do you remember?
Yeah.
So yeah, again, it's just another barrier for people who may not want their parents to be involved, or don't have contact with their parents if their parents are no longer with us, and all sorts of reasons why the process
Yeah.
is so difficult. And I don't think it needs to be.
No, I understand that they're trying to get a entire history of your life, but exactly, of course, people are, for a number of different reasons, they might not have that information. They might not know, yeah, exactly. They might not be in contact, and it shouldn't just rely heavily on, did people say this from the start of your life? Like
Sure.
that's such a big kind of thing that they seem to rely on. But I do feel like with my own diagnosis, I just tried to bring as much paperwork as I had that might have given an idea. Like, this is what I've had, like, from people. Like, here's some evidence.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from from people who talk to me. They always talk about the big pile of paperwork, especially women, actually, because I think women are more used to not being believed, and they take the big stack of stuff they've printed out and so on to the GP, because
Mm-hmm.
they're just expecting to be dismissed, like I was, and like so many others are.
Mm-hmm. I love that we just come in with organised folders of like, I can prove this to you.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right. I think we are so used to not being believed and needing that evidence, needing to prove ourselves, which, yeah, is really horrible. But yeah, I mean, in terms of kind of late diagnosis, it is really interesting because there are so many different forms of late diagnosis. Like, I don't really know what an on time diagnosis is, but as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I was diagnosed age 25, and to me, that feels like a late diagnosis. Like, I really wanted to have known this about myself sooner. However, your late diagnosis is much later in your life. Like, how do you feel about that? Would it have helped if people had noticed it sooner? All of those things.
That's a really interesting question, and I've been discussing this a lot with people recently of lots of different ages. And one of the things that I do in my talk, one of my talks is about my journey to diagnosis, from as far back as I can remember. And I talk about it. Sometimes it's tempting to be like the four Yorkshiremen in the Monty Python sketch, where they're trying to outdo each other with how poor they were growing up. Or we used to live in a rolled up newspaper in the middle of the road, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I, I used to feel a bit that way about the whole late diagnosis thing, because people would say, like you, I got diagnosed at 25, I got diagnosed late. And I think, well, I got diagnosed later. But then I realised that that's not helpful to anyone, and it's not helpful to me, because we're not in competition. I think what is interesting is understanding and reflecting on the different experiences that we have, and what the positives and negatives of those might be. Because some people say anything past primary school is a late diagnosis, which, because it should be and can be picked up in primary school. And I agree with that, because we find kids struggling at high school because they're undiagnosed, and I don't think we should be dismissive of anyone's experiences. And for you, diagnosed at 25, you went through primary school, secondary school, any higher education, and
Yep.
early working life, and all the stuff outside that, your social life, and the things that you're interested in, and all of that, without having a diagnosis where it could have helped. And I think we should recognize your experience and those of other young late diagnosed people. That sounds funny when I say young late diagnosed, but some people think that maybe we should be looking at categories when it's helpful. So while we're all late diagnosed, there's young adult late diagnosed, there could be midlife late diagnosed, I would fall into that. And then you might call it late diagnosed. And I know a few people who were diagnosed in their 70s and 80s, which is really late. And I think to celebrate those diagnoses is an important part of it, because it is something to celebrate, that understanding of ourselves and recognizing and learning from the different groups, because it's not just the fact that we are late diagnosed, it's also the fact that we grow up in different times. And if I was diagnosed early, that might have been worse for me, because there was so little understanding of ADHD and autism. What if I was given inappropriate medication when I was young? And I spoke to somebody who was, they were diagnosed early but didn't get the support, and they said that's not helpful at all. So I think your question is really interesting, because it helps us look at the wider picture around late diagnosis and also support, because the point of diagnosis is not just to understand ourselves but to get the right support, and many of us aren't, with or without the diagnosis.
Absolutely. And I do think something that I just kind of thought of as you were talking about that was, I remember being told that I was just born at the wrong time for autism to be a thing that could have been picked up or associated with me. And I was like, right, like, that's not what you want to hear. Like, there's nothing I can do about that. It's very specific. But that's the thing as well, is, you know, like you were saying, even if you had been kind of diagnosed within a normal time frame, not sure what that is, but, you know, it could still have been detrimental because of society's, you know, view on it, etc. So yeah, or just society not understanding at all. So yeah, I do think there's just so many layers to it.
Yes.
It's not an easy question to answer, I appreciate.
Yeah, I agree. And I think as well, when we're looking at the different ages of diagnosis, I think there's it's interesting to reflect on how that's shaped us, because I find with Gen X people like myself, we grew up in a generation where we just had to crack on. We weren't necessarily looked after particularly well, whether we were neurodivergent or neurotypical. And I think that generation does have an attitude of getting on with things, and I think sometimes that makes it easier for us to cope with things because we're used to it, whether or not that's right. I think we do have a layer of resilience, and I think one of the advantages that young people have is that they are so open about it, and I think they, you know, I'm speaking, I'm generalizing here, but this is, you know, what I see with the younger people that I work with. One of the great things that the younger generations are doing is, because they advocate for themselves openly and proudly, that has a positive impact on all of us, even, you know, people like me included, because we all benefit from people being unashamed of their neurodiversity, advocating for what they need. And I found that I've learnt an awful lot from younger neurodivergent people.
That's really great to hear, though. Like, you can kind of see the difference, even kind of online, I think, with just how much they own their diagnoses and how keen they are to just it's not spreading awareness, it's just talking about it and making sure people actually understand the ins and outs of, you know, their own personal experiences. Like, I feel like lived experience has, it's definitely more of a kind of term now when it comes to kind of neurodiversity. I do feel like lived experience is key when, you know, and you must know this from training people and stuff like that, like having you know, people on board who have that lived experience of being autistic, ADHD, etc. Like, it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, all our trainers have lived experience, and if we have a specialist trainer with a, you know, another identity, we insist on having lived experience of that identity as well.
I think that's great though, because you know, just where that person is coming from is something that they've lived. Like, having gone through that themselves, I think, of course, they're the best people to kind of talk about it. But I feel like in terms of training, that's been quite a slow thing to kind of come round to. I don't know if you've kind of found that, whether, you know, a lot of companies might not kind of appreciate that, might not kind of focus on the lived experience, and it's more kind of just coaching people. I don't know.
I think it was that way until relatively recently. Now we find that the lived experience is a big part of it. You know, that's what people ask us for. That's one reason that we have our other trainers, because I can talk about my lived experience, but I can't talk about what it's like to be a gay man, and I can't talk
Mhm.
about what it's like growing up as an Asian woman who's
Mhm.
neurodivergent. And we find that our training participants, whether or not they have those identities or not, they can learn a lot more from having this range of people with this experience, because I certainly do. And also
Mm.
for those people who share the same identity, they relate to those people um, with those identities as well,
Mhm.
which is really nice, because I think people deserve to have trainers who understand some of their experiences, at least. That, no one's going to understand everybody's, but at least having someone who really just gets some of the things about you and about your experience and about your cultural background or your identity. It's validating, I think.
Mhm. Yeah, massively. And I think, yeah, it's important to just even feel like a little bit kind of seen and understood. So, yeah, no, I definitely get that. Um, I was going to ask a bit more about, because we kind of touched on, you know, like sort of being early in like careers and not knowing that, like for me, not knowing I was autistic. Like, how did you find your own kind of career? Because I know that you were kind of in the media industry and kind of publishing, if that's right. And
That's right, yes.
yeah, it'd be interesting to understand, like, did did you kind of start to struggle at all with being in that kind of working world?
That's a really interesting question, because I did in some ways, and I didn't realize why I was struggling, because wherever I was like a fish out of water, but it could be attributed to something else. So my first job in publishing was in New York, and of course I'm actually dual national, but I grew up in England, so culturally I'm very English. So that was why I was a fish out of water. And then, um, my next job was I worked for an advertising agency, and that's a certain sort of group of people,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really fit in there either. And then I went to work for another company, which was smaller, so that was actually easier. And then when I started my own company when I was 30, again, I struggled not with fitting in, because it was just me and in my cupboard, which was my office was a cupboard under the stairs. But the
Oh.
struggles I faced there were quite severe, because even though I was working as an entrepreneur by myself, I was still struggling with um, being neurodivergent, and I had the structure taken away of having what I called a proper job. There was
Yeah.
no accountability. I had to make all the decisions by myself, and I wasn't used to having that lack of structure. So um, I found that incredibly difficult, but that's what led me to doing the job that I have now, because the impetus for when I changed careers from running my travel business to running this one was I was sitting in my office one day and thinking how difficult it was. I just got an ADHD coach and was starting to understand myself. And I thought, I don't want anyone else to struggle the way I did, because why should they? If I
Mm-hmm.
can help them, you know, understand themselves and manage their challenges.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. Like, it's interesting to hear, like, you saying, like, when you first read about ADHD on a beach, and like when, you know, like this scenario as well. It's interesting that you remember exactly where you were when you first kind of are having these like thoughts and feelings or reading things. Um, I think that's, yeah, it is quite interesting that you can remember them so like kind of clearly. But yeah, it's interesting to hear about kind of career wise, not knowing something's up, but something is up, sort of thing. I definitely kind of resonate with that feeling of just feeling like a fish out of water, not feeling like you fit, and not having a reason why. Not that you should have to, but yeah, it just feels harder. It feels like you're working 10 times as hard as everyone else, and everyone else has just got the manual to life and you haven't.
Yeah. And another thing that I found frustrating was because, like a lot of neurodivergent people, when I am able to do something that works to my strengths, and I was able to work in jobs that played to my strengths, I would work really well. So
Mhm.
one of the reasons that I did okay was because the actual quality of my work was good, and I worked so fast and so on, even though I think people thought I was a bit odd. Um,
Mhm.
But the flip side of that is that I got frustrated because I wasn't promoted fast enough. Um, I wanted to be moving up the career ladder, and people were saying, no, you haven't learned enough, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, but I can learn at, 10 times the pace of some of my colleagues. So why are you doing this? I knew I could do the job. And one of the reasons I job hopped a lot was because it was the quickest way to get promotion. And that's what I was, that was what I was looking for. I wanted that autonomy, which is very common in autistic people, to want that autonomy. And a lot of people don't realize quite how ambitious we are. They think we're going to be happy staying in that cupboard under the stairs, just tapping away on a keyboard day in, day out. But and that, that suits some people, and that's totally fine. Others of us want to make a difference, want to make an impact, and want to get out of the cupboard and actually reaching people who they can help, which was what I tried to do and still am trying to do.
You like saying about the job hopping as well. Like, I've had an experience where I was told that I wasn't displaying like any leadership skills, so I wasn't going to be promoted. And I said back to that, well, I'm not a manager. I'm like a solo in-house designer at the time. And I don't need leadership skills because I don't have anyone underneath me. And they found that baffling. I was just like, why do I need to tick that box in order to be promoted? And that is kind of the reason for the job hopping, because you constantly have to prove yourself. So actually, you're right. The easiest way to get a promotion is to go somewhere else. They see your years of experience, and then they offer you that, slightly higher up role. So yeah, I've definitely experienced that too, and it is really frustrating to have to prove yourself constantly.
Yeah, I agree. And I think another aspect of the world of work that doesn't suit us is that expectation of there's only one way to climb the career ladder. Like you were saying about managing people, it's not always an option for us autistic people, or it's not something that we want to do. So one of the concepts we came up with in our training was the idea that instead of climbing the career ladder, you climb the career tree. So you don't go straight up through a management hierarchy. And one of the problems with that is that you're no longer doing your job, you're managing people. And a lot of us like to do the actual work, like you were saying, being a designer. And I like to do my actual work. I love the training and the writing. But instead of moving up to just a people management role or a business management role, you kind of move up and sideways. So you can still do your job. You can be in a more senior role without having to necessarily do what it would be a standard management position. And we found with some of our clients that concept is working really well.
Just visualizing it different, like it not being, a straight up vertical pathway. Like, people should still be able to do the work, and the work that they're really good at and potentially fast at, can hyper focus on. Like, these are all like brilliant skills as workers. Like, I do feel like a lot of neurodivergent people are the best workers because they just apply themselves to the task at hand and can get things done and done well. Not saying that other people can't, but I do feel that a lot of companies promote the people that can talk the talk, and that can, I don't know, are quite like extroverted and are very kind of just, I'm not sure what it is. But I do feel like if you've got the confidence and you're very kind of outgoing, I feel like that works in your favor almost. Whereas for me, I'm seeing people getting promoted around me who, are very confident, outgoing, can talk lots, and I'm just like, is it because I'm not that? Like, yeah, I do think it makes you kind of question things. But yeah, I definitely think like the career tree should definitely be the new career ladder.
I agree.
So, kind of chatting about like Firebird and how that started, do you want to kind of like run us through some of the other training courses that you do? Because obviously you mentioned about your one about your route to kind of, diagnosis, your kind of process. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear what other kind of things that you offer. And is it to sort of a range of company sizes, or do you kind of get sort of the same sized companies coming to you?
We work with a huge range of organisations in different sectors. We work. You mentioned the NHS, so we work with government organisations, charities, lots of corporate people, lots of banks, tech companies, law firms, people like that. And in terms of the what we offer, the story about my journey, that's a keynote talk. So I would do that at an event, a conference, something like that. And we do I do a number of talks like that on the different aspects of neurodiversity. So some people just want to sit back and listen to my story, which is why I do it. But others are kind of more informational. So like a guide to neurodiversity, why it's important, how to be inclusive, and so on. And we've just launched a new one, which is for leadership people, called Beyond Woke, the future of inclusive leadership, because we're starting to see this DEI backlash in part, and we're looking at what's going to be the next step in diversity and inclusion, and we're going to be talking about how that might impact leaders and how to be more inclusive by going beyond box ticking, and of course all the benefits of that. So those are some of the talks that I do. And in terms of the training, we offer a lot of things. A lot of our clients want a bespoke package, which we can offer them. Some of the off-the-shelf packages we offer are an introduction to neurodiversity, which is really popular because it's a starting point, and most of our clients come to us when they're right at the beginning of their neurodiversity journey, which is really exciting because they're curious and really keen to learn, and so on. Then we have neurodiversity for managers. We have neurodiversity in recruitment. We have a fairly new course, which is inclusive events. I don't know about you, but I find that the vast majority of events don't consider neurodiversity at all. And so we're being shut out of events because they're just too difficult. But also for events organisers, you're basically not catering for 20% of the population. So unless your event is full, it's something that you need to consider when you're planning an event. You need to consider neurodiverse access and inclusion, because that's a big part of the population that you want to attract. So that's one of our newest courses, which I'm quite excited about. Then as far as our bespoke courses, we're now doing quite a lot on mental health, which is exciting. We have a specialist mental health trainer who is so highly qualified. I can't remember all the letters after their name, but they're very, very good. They're neurodivergent too. We have we were the first neurodiversity consultancy, and I think we're still the only one to have a dedicated intersectionality trainer who talks about they talk about all the intersections and what that actually means about having these different identities, but also about their lived experience of being a racial minority and female, and neurodivergent, and how that impacted her. We have an LGBTQ plus trainer now too, which is fun, talking about those intersections. We have a couple who focus on women, because we sometimes find people want training specifically on autism in women or ADHD in women, and we are starting to get people asking about parenting. So we do some courses on whether you're a neurodivergent parent or you have a neurodivergent kid, or, as is quite common, both, and how to manage that. And we have some new people on board actually for those who can talk about the difficulties with school, and the paperwork and procedures that you need to go through to get your kid the support that they need, which a lot of parents and indeed young people will be familiar with, because it's such a difficult system, and we know it's not working, but if that's a system that you have to work in, we can help them with that. What's interesting to me about that actually is that it's companies that are putting these on for the parents in their staff, which I was a little bit surprised at, because we only came up with these as a reaction to what we were being asked for.
Yeah.
And they were saying we've got neurodiversity ERG, or we've got neurodivergent people, so we want that, but we've also got a parents group, because these are parents who have to go off to go and sort things out with their kids and so on. So they're trying to support the parents in the workplace through these, which I think is, to me, it seems quite progressive. And that's what I love working with, these progressive companies who are thinking about all these different ways they can support their staff. It's just, they're just a joy to work with. I'm very privileged to have this job because I just have the best clients.
Yeah, I was just thinking you must meet such a range of different kind of age groups, but also different kind of seniority of people and different like levels of, like, I don't know, senior leadership and things like that. Like, it
Yeah,
must be quite interesting to see at the different levels, like, who's thinking about it, who's, contacted you, who's it
yeah.
going to help, like, how does it filter down almost?
Yeah, and it's interesting to see, because quite a lot in the big companies that I work for, I'll just train one section of their staff or one department, and I never get to see anyone else. But sometimes with the smaller companies, I've worked for some beauty companies and some manufacturers, which has been quite fun. And sometimes you'll have the warehouse workers in the same room as the CEO, and other people like the marketing team and the hiring team and so on. And that's always quite fun. And I think that's quite interesting from an inclusion point of view. There's us autistic people, we recognise hierarchies but don't always value them, I think. And it's nice to see sometimes when we see the CEO or senior leadership, being treated and treating others the same as everybody else. I think that's a great avenue into being more inclusive, because you're not kind of putting one part of the company is more important than another, and recognizing, because most of the work I do is around, like I said, people who work in banks and law firms, sort of professionals in offices. So it's quite refreshing sometimes to work with people who have a slightly different sort of job than I might meet normally.
You're almost getting a sort of snapshot of what their day is like briefly while you're kind of there.
Yeah,
Yeah, that sounds really cool. I was going to say as well, like, kind of makes me think, like, what you were saying about kind of hierarchy and stuff. Like, I think it's really interesting when, you do get a whole company in one place and everyone is kind of treated the same, and that everyone's invited to this training or everyone's invited to this. And I do feel like, as a neurodivergent person, that can be quite a confusing thing to navigate, which I kind of think you kind of touched on. But especially with things like a lot of tech companies and kind of even kind of manufacturing places have kind of like open door policies, and like they say they have a flat hierarchy kind of thing, when actually, I mean, visually the door is never open to their offices, and also you don't get the sense that it is, like
yes,
an open door policy.
yes.
Like, and I do find like that sort of thing within workplaces is not very inclusive. Like, they say it meaning well, but actually the door should be open, and there should be times that you can pop by, kind of thing. Like, even sort of simple things like that, I feel could be, like, way more inclusive.
Yeah, and even simple things like that are things that we, depending on the type of training that the client wants, those are the sorts of things we touch on. We talk about communication a lot because we feel that communication is the foundation of having a truly inclusive workplace. And things like, being able to talk to the different people in your organization. And we talk a lot about modeling as well, that the senior leadership need to model the behaviors that they want to see, including disclosing if they're comfortable doing that. We never make anyone disclose, obviously, but we find that when they talk about wanting to build an inclusive culture, having that open communication, demonstrating the behaviors and expressing things that they want to see can go a long way to achieving that.
And I also think, like, as someone who has job searched in the past, like, if I go on a company's website and I see they offer training, but they also have like groups across the different, intersectionalities and things, like that draws me to a company, that draws me to want to apply, because I think, do you know what, they'll understand it, I can disclose, and potentially they'll understand my reasonable adjustments. Like, it makes me want to apply when I see that I might be seen within this company.
Yeah.
And I think, I feel like a lot of DEI stuff is very much like, you need to do this training, it's mandatory, we need to cover it, we need to tick that box. But actually, it's so much more than that. Like, it means so much to people who are applying from so many different, like, walks of life, let alone, having the training and stuff. Seeing as we've been talking about inclusion, I know that you did a TEDx talk, which was titled "Inclusion is Selfish." What was that process like? Were you like, how did you come about delivering a TED talk?
Well, I can't remember how I found out, but I knew TEDx was coming to Warrington. It was the first cohort, and you had to apply by making a video. And I made a video walking down the road. I can't even remember what I said now, but I was talking about being ADHD autistic and how it's challenging for me to make the video. I don't make a lot of videos because for many, many years I suffered from body dysmorphic disorder. So I've recovered largely now, but it's still something of a challenge to make a video. But that's, you have to for TEDx. So I shared some ideas, and then during the process of, I was chosen from all the applicants to be one of the cohort, and then we had coaching, and we developed our talk. We had a lot of support developing the talk for TEDx, and that's how I developed this idea of inclusion is, because we think about inclusion as being for other people, but actually inclusion is something we can do for ourselves. And one of the reasons is because when we encourage people to be more authentic, we become more authentic ourselves. So it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, or a virtuous circle, if you like, that when you treat people with that kind of respect and understanding and encourage them to be themselves, and you accept them as themselves, you start to behave like that as well. You start to be yourself more, and I think people become more compassionate as well.
Yeah, definitely. And was there kind of like did you have to almost know it off by heart? Did you have to keep to a time limit? Like, I feel like it can be quite a kind of strict sort of structure, a TED talk.
It really is, because you might have 10 people on the stage, and you can't go over time. You cannot go over, I think it's 17 or 18 minutes, because the TEDx rules, they have a lot of rules. There's certain things you can and can't wear, you can and can't say. Everything you say needs to be verified. You can't use real people's names without consent. Lots and lots of rules. And It's one of the few talks that I did memorize, because you have to keep to time, and it was important to me to be word perfect on that. If you slip up, they can edit it out, but because it's such a tight time limit, you really do have to be word perfect, which on my other talks, I know what I'm going to say, but it's not very tightly scripted. I will script the bits where I sometimes trip over the words, or it's a joke that has to be delivered in the exact right way. The funny thing is, the only other time where I've delivered a wholly scripted talk from memory is both the times I've been best woman at a wedding. And one of those times was because I was afraid I'd get the name wrong.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was so scared that, honestly, those best women speeches, those are more nerve-wracking than a lot of the keynotes that I've done. But TEDx was the most nerve-wracking of all.
Isn't that interesting that those come up quite highly when you are talking to such a range of people? Like, it just shows that you care a lot about the people whose weddings you're at.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, if I'm doing training or a keynote, people who come and hear me might go to a number of training courses or see a number of keynotes. And I still, I'm very, very committed to them enjoying it and getting something out of it, and doing what I can to a high standard. And I put myself through an awful lot of training to try and continuously improve as a public speaker. But at a wedding, that's only going to happen. You hope that's only going to happen once. It's
Yeah.
a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I can imagine. Just putting yourself in front of people all the time, like, do you still get nervous to talk? Like, do you still, even if it, isn't unscripted, and say maybe you have like a slide deck behind you, which I noticed you didn't have for the TEDx talk, which I was feel like would be scary to not be able to just kind of turn around and look at stuff. But like, do you still get nervous to kind of do training and talks, or do you feel like you've kind of gotten used to it almost?
I do still get nervous. I think nerves show that you care. I'm always a bit
Mhm.
suspicious of people who do my job and don't say they don't get nervous. Um, the nerves is because um, I want it to go well for the audience's
Mhm.
sake. I tend to get less nervous with training because it's a bit more of a relaxed environment. But the nerves tend to go when I start speaking. It's almost like I was told once that I became a different person when I started speaking, because it's a job to do public speaking. You don't get up and talk like you would to a mate in a pub. It might sound like it, but if you're a good public speaker, that's cultivated. If it sounds like you're
Mhm.
talking to your mate in a pub, even though it isn't. And a lot of the things that I do are deliberately designed um, to get the audience engaged, keep them engaged. Because talking to people with ADHD, you've got to work hard to retain their attention, and I know that from having ADHD myself.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, it's funny because the easier it looks, I think, the harder it is. It is hard to make it look natural and look relaxed and look easy, but
Mhm.
I really, really enjoy doing it.
And that's the most important thing, isn't it? Like, the fact that you do enjoy what you do.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you, do you feel like you are someone that masks or is an unmasked sort of speaker? Like, do you, like you saying, like, you kind of become this different sort of person? Do you find that you catch yourself masking at all? Or, like, I just find it very interesting to talk to, like, especially women, about autistic masking and whether or not they kind of notice it, like, kind of post diagnosis. Like, do you rely on masking?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, actually, because ironically, I feel like I mask less when I'm speaking, even though it's kind of a performance,
Mm.
because it is still me. I'm just speaking in a way that's engaging, but I'm not pretending to be somebody else. Whereas I find that I mask a lot unconsciously um, in more day-to-day situations.
Mm-hmm.
So in conversations with strangers or um, whoever it might be, I do find it's just so ingrained now, because I'm 50 years old. I've spent my whole life doing this. I don't really know
Yeah.
where the masking stops and I begin. And I find a lot of people who are late diagnosed like that. Uh, it's so much to unpack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I guess also, when you're turning up for kind of speaking and training, people are paying you to be yourself. They want you as, your authentic autistic ADHD self, don't they? Because that's kind of what the topic is.
Yeah, even though that's the case, they come first. So
Mm.
in normal life, I advocate to meet in the middle, whether it's communication or people's needs or whatever. So, for example, if you're talking to an autistic person and their face isn't doing what you want it to, you just let that go. You know, I
Yeah.
don't. One of the things that I stopped doing was fake smiling and fake laughing a lot of the time, because that was a masking thing that I did, and I just gave that up. And some people react quite badly to that,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not really my problem. But when I go to clients, the focus is entirely on them, because that's what I'm paid to be there. And I actually, surprisingly, I find that really easy, because I'm really focused and focusing on what they want and what they need and how I can deliver the best training that I can in that time because a lot of my clients are incredibly busy and they need to make the most of that time. And I don't think, I think I don't have so many needs at my job, like my need to fidget or my need to stim or whatever, because I'm focusing on what I'm doing, and that kind of takes away a lot of my needs that I'd have outside that because I'm properly stimulated. I think sometimes we stim or fidget or whatever because we're not adequately stimulated, but when I'm working, I really am.
That's good. Like, it sounds like you're so engrossed and kind of, focused in on the thing that, yeah, I definitely get that. Like, I kind of feel like the stimming for me is like a release of like pent up energy or frustration, or I guess it's me trying to get out feelings when I can't label feelings at all.
Yes.
So yeah, I definitely understand that logic.
It's quite a it's quite an important space for people as well to be honest and be themselves. We've had people cry in our sessions because it's the first time they've been able to disclose, or sometimes it's quite often we have this. It's the first time they've recognised themselves. They never realised they had ADHD, or they never realised they were dyscalculic because they'd never heard of it before, and they realise it, and it's just like this huge relief. So it's really important to have that focus because you're dealing with important things for people, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical. So I find that it's quite humbling to be trusted that much with people, and I find that does really really help me with with my focus and that passion. I suppose it taps into my passion for wanting to deliver what they need, and I think having that passion kind of is so exciting and stimulating and rewarding that it overrides anything else.
It's kind of fascinating, isn't it? Like, I can't imagine being sat in one of your sessions and that realization dawning on you that actually, oh, this massively aligns with me. Like, this is that, what you're kind of training about is like someone's entire world. Like, I can't imagine that, like, kind of realization coming over people. But how lovely to be able to, feel like you can disclose, like, kind of during or once having the training. Like, it's so great to be able to get to that place, I think.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you as well, you do many different roles, and another thing that you have done is written a book. So could you kind of talk us through that? What made you want to write a book, and kind of the concept that you're offering it both as something that can be bought and also something that can be like downloaded and read for free? Yeah, let us know all about the book journey.
Well, because I talk to a lot of late diagnosed autistic people, a number of whom got diagnosed because of me, I felt that I had a certain responsibility to help guide them through the post-diagnostic process. And people would email me and they would go, oh, what do I do next? I don't know what to do. And that was rewarding, but it was also quite time consuming. And then one day my friend came round and he said, I've just been diagnosed autistic, to which I responded, well, there's a surprise, because I could sit a mile off. And he said, what do I do now? And I said, I don't know.
What do you do now? I'd like to know that too.
Exactly. And my book is a response to that. What do I do now? This book is going to tell you. And I wrote it like a guide. So it's almost sort of a chronological guide as to what to do next when you have been diagnosed autistic, different stages you can go through. I mean, you don't have to do everything in it, and it's not I mean, a lot of autistic people have PDA, so I'm not going to tell anyone what to do. It's just some things that you could do. So things like research autism, so you understand yourself better, and here's some sources of information. Tell people, who are you going to tell first, who are you going to tell next, how it might go. Finding your tribe, finding other autistic people if that's something that you want to do. And there's a bit at the end, the last chapter was the hardest to write, and that was about finding your purpose, because I think once you have a new identity, it can be quite challenging to integrate that with what you want to do. And I found that when I recovered in a large part from some of the mental health issues I had, and I didn't really know how to live without that identity of being constantly depressed, which sounds odd, but that's how it is. You know, when you've been living with these things for so long, you don't really know how to live without them, or in this case with autism, how to live as an autistic person who knows they're autistic, because that's different from what you were before. You were either, you thought you weren't autistic, or you thought you might be, and now you are. So what does that mean, and what are you going to do with your life that's going to be satisfying? So the book is it's this guide for people, so they've got somewhere to go and to help them. If they don't like it, there's a huge reading list in the back of other books about autism, and some of those focus on specific dual identities or specific aspects of autism. So there's books for women, there's a book about being autistic and black, and so on. So they can carry on their learning journey if they want to. The reason I made it free is because so many autistic people are unemployed. We know that. We know there's huge unemployment amongst autistic people, and I think there's underemployment as well, as I have been in the past. But, you know, I was saying I wanted a promotion, I didn't get it, so I wasn't earning as much as I felt I should or could be. So I didn't want cost to be a barrier to people accessing the book if they thought it might be useful, which is why I made it free to download as a PDF. And it's illustrated, and it has charts and boxes and stuff in it, so it's not just a big, I know some people find a big wall of text quite difficult to process, so we got a designer involved, Joe Mansfield, to design and illustrate it, just so it'd be a bit more visually appealing and easier to read, to be honest. And one of the lovely things that happened, which I wasn't expecting, people started giving it to their kids. And it's not written for kids, it's written for adults. But the reading age is about 12, again, for accessibility. Most of what I write has a reading age of about 12, just because it's easier to read, even if you're not 12. But it meant that the kids could read it, and they were giving it to their kids and saying, you know, mostly teenagers, and saying, actually, my kids found it really useful. That was very gratifying.
Yeah. That's really interesting, isn't it? That it's had like almost a wider response.
Yeah, and I was getting messages from people who read it saying extraordinary things, like it's helped my relationship. We've become closer. And, you know, that wasn't my intention, but, you know, I'm really pleased. And someone emailed me from Argentina saying he was reading it at 3 a.m. and shouting yes, because he could recognise himself in what I was saying. Because the way I write and communicate tends to be quite light-hearted. It tends to be tangible, because I find a lot of information about autism to be sort of the things that you can't really get hold of. It's all a bit theoretical. So I wanted to give real life examples about, you know, about some of the things we do. Some of it's quite funny. My designer said her favourite picture was drawing the box of poo. That was a reference to unpacking the crap, which we've touched on in this conversation, that there's a lot to unpack, and some of us have a lot of crap to unpack. We've got a lot of trauma, we've got a lot of mental health issues, and while the book is also compassionate and serious when it needs to be, we also recognise, you know, we can have some fun with this too. We can have some humour, and you know, my designer can draw a box of poo.
Excellent. I think, yeah, that is important as well, is that it does show both sides, that, you know, this is, you know, serious and it is your life, but actually humour is so important, and can really get you through like rough times. But yeah, like I've downloaded it to have a look at, and I've started reading it, and the layout of it, I love that it's just like chunks of like you say, like in boxes and things. Like it's not like you're opening a novel, because sometimes that can be really overwhelming when it's a book to do with being autistic or ADHD, etc., and you're just like hit with a wall of text. It's actually kind of like, oh god, this is like an entire novel I need to read. Whereas it feels like, it just feels more accessible and more like easy. And I know that's obviously you've had that in mind, but it's just easier to read when it's chopped up in a nice way and designed in a kind of in a nice layout, which kind of also means you can dip in and out of it. Whereas I feel like with novels, I always kind of want to get to the end of a chapter.
Yeah.
Whereas with this, I kind of feel like you can go at your own pace. So yeah, I definitely will link to the How to Be Autistic website.
Yeah.
I don't know if did we say that was the name of the book? I don't know. I think, oh no, we did. You said it at the start.
And you can, if people want to get it free, the website is howtobeautistic.com.
Yeah. Okay, great. I will pop that in the show notes in case people are interested.
Thank you.
I guess it would be interesting to know in the context of your job, like I know that you have mentioned that you struggle with face blindness. Like, how did you kind of realize this, and have you found kind of ways of managing it, especially if, you know, you're seeing lots of different clients and lots of different people and just networking with so many people? Like, how do you manage that?
It varies. I mean, you were talking about masking, and with my prosopagnosia, that's one area that I mask a great deal because people get offended if you don't recognize them. One of the issues with prosopagnosia or face blindness is not only that you don't recognize people, but you don't realize that two people are different people. That happens to me quite a lot. If two people kind of look similar and I see them in the same place, I don't always realize that they're two people.
Right. Okay.
Which has caused some embarrassment in the past. Fortunately, most of my work is location specific, so I'm expecting to see a client when I go there. I don't tend to see people when I'm not expecting them to. When I'm
Right.
not expecting to see them, which makes it a bit easier. So sometimes I'm just up front and I tell people I've got prosopagnosia, I'm face blind, I can't recognise people. But a lot of the time, when I just wing it, because it's not just that I have to remember or I'm expected to remember. It's their name and their job and where they work and the name of their cat and so on. And out of those things, the name of the cat is absolutely the thing I'm most likely to remember. So yeah, there is a lot of winging it, but I think I'm getting worse at that because more recently I found that when people come up to me and start talking to me, they realise that I'm looking blank and then they reintroduce themselves.
Right.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, it's odd because I've always felt embarrassed about my face blindness, even though it's not my fault. I think because when I was younger, I've had so much trouble with it and got into trouble because of it. I got told off because I didn't say hi to my friend's girlfriend, and there was all this, are you jealous or whatever? And I was like, dude, everyone you go out with looks the same. I don't recognise that. I'm sorry.
It's weird that people take so much kind of offense because of it, when actually, you know, it's quite, it should be okay to just be like, I'm really sorry, I don't, I can't place you, kind of thing. Like, that should be okay, I
Yeah,
think.
yeah.
And also, I was going to ask you, is it something that you've sort of struggled with for most of your life? And obviously you saying about your childhood and stuff,
Oh
kind of
yes,
confirm that.
I didn't realise though until I was in my 30s. I thought everyone could not recognise people, because with people I tend to see shape. So people who have similar hair tend to blend in. So certain groups of people are harder to separate. So school mums in winter, because they all wear the same puffer and they all tend to have similar hair, are quite difficult. White men in films, because they tend to have very similar hair and quite often wear similar clothes. I could not follow Reservoir Dogs at all because I didn't know
Oh,
who anyone
because,
was.
yeah, they're all of a similar, yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I didn't realise until I was in my 30s, which is when I moved in with he was my boyfriend at the time. He's now my husband. And we'd watch TV or a film together. And I'd ask Kim what was going on and things. And I'd say, who's that? And he'd say that guy's been in it since the beginning. He's just wearing a different shirt now or something. Or
Right.
I thought two people were the same guy, even though one had a beard, because I thought it was flashback. And then
Right.
he got completely baffled with the level of my not understanding what we were watching. And then it was then that I realised that normal people don't see people the way I do. They actually can tell the difference between different people. So there's levels of face blindness. Mine is not severe. I can recognise people that I know fairly easily. And sometimes I can meet someone 10 times and not recognize them, and another person I can meet them once and recognize them. It just depends on their face.
Right.
And the funny
Okay.
thing is, attractive people are harder because,
Interesting.
yeah, because attractive people, they tend to have more averages in their features. So their eyes won't be wide spaced and their forehead won't be large. I have a large forehead myself, so I'm not slating anyone for that. Um, that their nose will be a medium size and so on. So they're actually more trouble to recognize than somebody who's got more distinctive features.
Mhm. That's really interesting.
Mhm.
It's interesting to hear how you navigate it. Um, is it? I don't know if it is also. Is it something that kind of can evolve and change? I don't know too much about like. Can it progress, sort of thing?
I think it just stays the same. You get better at coping with it, but my
Yeah.
ability to recognize faces is no better or worse than
Right.
it was when I was a child.
Okay. So it's kind of a stable sort of
Yeah,
thing, right?
it's just, I mean, I think it's the way you would perceive other things as well, like how you would perceive colour, if you're colourblind or not, or
Yeah.
things like that. One thing I like to joke about is that I would be terrible at running a lookalike agency. Like, out of all the jobs I genuinely couldn't do, lookalike agency is up there because people looked so similar to me, and I would just send someone out who looked nothing like they were the celebrity they were meant to.
Excellent. That I quite like that as a kind of one-liner joke. That's quite good.
Yeah,
That works well. Um, okay, that is yeah. I definitely think it's something that not a lot of people have heard about,
yeah,
and or have thought, oh yeah, I've had it before, where like you're in a different location and you can't place someone, but
yeah,
that's totally different. Like I feel like that is yeah completely different. Whereas you're having to go through that kind of I don't know that kind of inner thought cycle of who is this, and do you find like would you say that the like being autistic kind of overlaps with that sometimes as well in terms of just maybe kind of sensory wise like
yeah. I don't have any stats on this, but from talking to people, because I didn't even mention it for many, many years, but since I've mentioned it a few times, it seems that this is more common in autistic people.
oh okay, that's interesting. And I guess this kind of leads quite nicely onto asking you, when you have time, what are your kind of hobbies and special interests? Like what do you enjoy unpicking outside of your professional roles?
Well, I did mention that I was married and I've got 2 kids, so I enjoy playing with my children a lot. They've taught me how to play Minecraft, and
Oh,
sometimes we play Fortnite and we play with Lego, which I enjoy. I like going out walking with them. I'm overweight and I'm trying to lose weight, so I go to the gym. But I also
hmm,
found that once I shifted my mindset from trying to lose weight to using the gym as a way to improve my mental health, I enjoy
hmm,
it a lot more. I love to swim. I find
okay,
a lot of autistic people like water, so
hmm,
I really enjoy swimming. I'm learning British Sign Language. Um, I'm writing a screenplay and a novel and a stand-up comedy set because I'd quite like to do stand-up comedy as a part-time job. And I have my autistic special interests, one of which is the cult TV show Inside Number 9.
yes. So tell us a little bit more about that. I mean, I'm glossing over the fact that you've got so many different hobbies that I actually don't know how you have time in your day. But yes, tell us about Inside Number Nine. Like, why is that? Why is that one of your special interests?
I think because I love how well it's crafted. So my degree was in English and I'm hyperlexic, which means I love words, I love language, I love literature. I read a lot when I've got the attention span, which is not that often. But I just love. It's hard to say this without coming off like a intellectual or kind of snobby about art. And I'm not. Whatever floats your boat. I'm happy for you, but this is a thing that I like, and the reason I like it is because it is so it's so intense and so so interesting and well made, and it's got all these different layers that you can go into. It's a bit like, you know, when you read a book more than once, and you can read it with several different views, and you can read it again and again and spot new things. I find
Yes.
that with Inside Number 9.
Mm.
And so there are 9 series of the show, and I've watched all episodes 2 or 3 times, apart from 2, one of which is the last one, which I'm saving for, you know, a special time. One of which is, the other one I haven't watched twice, is Wise Owl, because I found it too traumatic. And if people have watched Wise Owl, they will understand what that means.
Mm-hmm.
I have watched the documentary. I have, during lockdown, I watched them online on an online event in conversation. I've seen them live in an in conversation thing. I've been to the Inside Number 9 stage show, Stage Fright, in London. I have all 9 script books signed. I have the Insider's Guide to Inside Number 9. I have the postcard set of Inside Number 9. And I have made myself an Inside Number 9 themed shed.
Incredible.
Yeah.
I think we can that's definitely a special interest for you, and how amazing that you like having signed scripts and stuff. That's so cool. And just having the collections of things related to it is really cool. So is that
Yeah.
all in your shed, or
No, I wouldn't keep them in my shed, because
wouldn't keep them?
they
Right.
would not survive. My husband, who is neurotypical, is really, really good about supporting my special interests. So all the books were gifts from him. He bought tickets to the event. He likes Inside Number 9 as well. He's not as weird about it as I am, because I don't think anyone is, frankly. I forgot to
Not
mention.
weird, passionate.
I forgot to mention as well, I listened to the podcasts Inside Number 9 too, for a
Oh,
time. But yeah, he's really good about that. He enjoys his show too, and it's something we can enjoy together. But he's just really been lovely about me supporting that. When we went to the stage show, he bought me the program set from that. And one of my other special interests is the Battle of Agincourt, which was a battle between England and France in 1415 as part of the 100 Years' War. And I'd already got myself a couple of books on Agincourt, and I've been there twice. Last year, in fact, with my family, the kids were not thrilled at all. They were like, "Mum, it's a field." And I was like, "I'm having the best day ever." And it's like, it's a field. Anyway, the kids actually, to be fair to the kids, they were actually really quite supportive, because they know I'm obsessed with it, and they're
oh,
really
that's
good
so
about,
nice.
giving me that time without complaining to visit the field again, and the museum. But for my birthday last year, it's big birthday, 50, my husband gave me an Agincourt box full of Agincourt
Ooh,
themed memorabilia and merch and facsimiles of documents and stuff like that,
oh
in
my
a
word.
specially designed box. Yeah, it's really nice to be with someone who doesn't shame me for your special interest, because there's not many people I can talk to about these things. I said when we started talking about this, I
Mm.
didn't want to come off as the intellectual elite, or snobby about my tastes and stuff, and that's because so many times before I have been shamed for it, because of the things that I like. And it's nice to have this conversation, and it's nice to have conversations with my husband and my friends about the things that I enjoy, when people aren't going to accuse me of being boring or elitist or
Mm.
pretentious. That's come up quite a few times. I don't even know what
Yeah.
pretentious means, really, because I'm not. I just like talking about things, and I understand if they're not someone else's passion, but they are mine. And I really like, one of the things I like about autistic people is when they info dump on me about the things that they're passionate about, even if it's
Hmm.
something I don't know anything about, because I just find the level of detail sometimes is really quite fascinating.
Oh, massively, absolutely. And I think also it's almost sad to me that you felt that you needed to caveat by saying, like, before I say my special interests, like, you know, you had to kind of be like, I don't want to come across as this or that or this or that, when actually you should be allowed to absolutely talk away. And um the people that don't give you the time or the space to talk about, you know, your special interests are not the people to be around, because I think you're right. It's absolutely fascinating, and I very much encourage info dumping on this podcast because I just love to learn what goes on inside people's minds, but also, what makes, people really passionate and enthusiastic. And I really think special interests keep us going as neurodivergent people, like to the extent that I think they really give us a reason to exist and live some of the time, especially when mental health creeps in. So I do massively see the benefit of just being able to indulge in your special interest. And your husband sounds like a keeper because he's absolutely allowing you to do that.
Yeah, he's not only allowing me, he's actively supporting it, and it's just
Yeah, how
yeah,
lovely.
it's just really lovely. I feel very
Oh,
lucky actually.
oh. Have you? Did you said that you'd lived together before? Have you been together for a long time?
We've been together 23 years. He was one of those people in the advertising agency where I didn't fit in.
Ah,
He did, and he he thought of my oddness as being cute and quirky, and not many people saw that. And then we did live together, and then when we got married, we actually eloped because I didn't want a wedding. Because
amazing.
yeah, I think some autistic people don't really like ceremony and stuff. I wanted to be married, but I didn't want a wedding, so we eloped, and then we had our kids not long after that.
Oh, that's really, you've done things your way, which is nice to hear because, yeah, you shouldn't have to conform to having a big wedding and all that. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't want it. No, that sounds great. That's really nice. And then one last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about kind of creativity. And I know drawing is something that is important to you. So I think it'd be quite a nice thing to kind of round out the podcast by just talking about all things creative.
Yeah, well, I don't normally talk about drawing because I can't draw very well, but I wanted to talk about it on this podcast because obviously that is something that you do. And the reason I don't draw much, well, I used not to draw much, is because I'm not very good. And um, I went to Centre Parks with my family earlier this year, and one of my kids and I went to you can do painting on ceramics, and I
Mm-hmm.
painted a plate. And I got my plate when it was finished, and I said, it looks like something a 14-year-old would do, which is true. And then I realised that was the age I gave up art. So it looks like a 14-year-old did it because that's where I got to
Okay, that makes sense.
when I was learning to draw or paint. And I gave it up because I was no good, and I was told that I was no good. I tried to resurrect it at one point when I was in a group. I went to an adult drawing class and got told off for doing for doing it wrong.
You got told off
Yeah,
in an adult. What?
we were
Why can't
copying
you just?
photos of the local area to draw them, and the
Hmm.
one I had was quite dark, but I could see on the picture the darker stuff that I don't think the teacher could see it. I don't think her colour perception was that good. So I was drawing that, and she told me off because she said, "You're drawing what you know is there because we know the area rather than copying the photo exactly."
What?
So yeah, I know. So I didn't go back to that. And then sometimes I draw with the kids. They would sometimes give me pen and paper if I was upset because I don't know why. I don't think you ought to do, but they knew drawing's a nice thing. So they give me pen and paper and I sketch and they go, "Oh, great drawing, mummy." And I was like,
Oh.
"It's not, but cheers." And they've really encouraged me. And I said to one of them the other day, "You're better than any art teacher I've had. Even though you don't know the ins and outs of art, you have encouraged me to draw, and I've got better because of you." And now I
Oh.
paint, I do watercolors. They're all, I would say they're rubbish, but other people say they're actually all right. They're never going to be, um, something that might be considered, what's the word I'm looking for? Technically, particularly
Mm.
proficient.
Hmm.
But they're all right. And in fact, someone said to me the other day, if I saw that on a card, I would buy that. So I
There
don't
you
think I'm
go.
as bad
Yeah.
as I say, but on it, I enjoy it so much. I just love it, sitting there painting, sitting with my kids, doing different kinds of art.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I just love that the kids have encouraged me to do that. But what I learned when I was younger, and I had a lot of perfectionist tendencies, I still do, but at least I channeled them into where it matters, like my work. But I
Mm.
wouldn't do something if I wasn't very good at it, because I didn't really
Mhm.
see the point. And it meant I didn't do a lot of things that just for the fun. I was never taught to do something for the fun of it. And now I draw and paint for the fun, and I run around for the fun of it, and um, do a few other things. I do craft and stuff that, yeah, I'm not particularly proficient at, but it's enjoying the process, and it's something that I wish that somebody had told me a long time ago, that doing something because you enjoy it is fine, and it doesn't matter if you're not very good. But what is nice too is that you actually get better. You may never be completely brilliant at something, because not many people are, at the top of their field in anything, but you could be, you can get better, and I have got better because of the encouragement I've had from my kids, which is nice.
Yeah, it is
Um,
nice. And I also think like the thing is, art is so like subjective, isn't it? Like,
yes.
but it's not about quality or quantity or anything like that. If you enjoy it, that's the most important thing. And okay, technically you might not have, I don't know, been to art school and learnt all the ins and outs, but that doesn't mean that you're not, an artist. If you're painting, if you're drawing, like you're an artist. Like, and the fact that people have said as well that not that you should just go on people's opinions, but the fact that people have been like, if that was on a card, I'd have a bit of that. I think that says a lot as to how you're seeing it versus how other people are seeing it. Um,
Yeah.
but that's great that your kids have, kind of brought you right kind of round to the idea that actually it is a good thing. And I love that they just kind of handed you a bit of paper to draw on if you were like upset. I guess maybe to kind of get your feelings out, sort of thing. Um,
Yeah.
but I like that as an idea. I'm just wondering if I was upset if someone did that, if someone offered that to me, like might might distract you for a bit, like
Yeah.
take your
um,
mind off it.
I found it quite therapeutic, actually.
Yeah, I think that's really lovely that that almost kind of instinct kicked in for them to be like, here, have a bit of paper.
Yeah.
How lovely. Oh, bless them. But yeah, I think it's hard because, especially when it comes to art and creative kind of endeavors, it's hard not to compare yourself, and especially to other artists and things. But I do think there is something to be said for developing like your own style and your own kind of, I don't know, just I like to think that people might see one of my drawings and go, oh, I know who did that. Like
Yeah.
that to me is really cool and would mean more than someone kind of commenting on, I don't know, the use of color and shading and stuff like that. Like if someone can recognize my work, then I kind of feel like, oh, I might have a style. Like that's kind of cool.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think it's about kind of sort of just enjoying it, really. I think, and doing it for yourself and not for other people
Yeah.
necessarily. But I know that that's, yeah, it can be hard not to. We've almost been talking for an hour and a half. It's gone really quickly.
Yeah.
Um, how can people find you and your work online? Um, and I'll make sure to pop these links in the show notes as well.
Thank you. Well, we talked about my book, howtobeautistic.com. That's where you can find that. My consultancy website is askfirebird.com,
Mm-hmm.
and I can be reached through there. And as for social media, I'm mainly on LinkedIn
Yeah, you've
as
got
my
quite a
main.
following, haven't
Yeah,
you?
yeah. And then I have a very confused Instagram account. I don't know what I'm doing with Instagram, to be honest. I keep changing my mind about what I want to use it for, but I just kind of info dump whatever's on my mind on there, and that's Firebird _ neurodiversity. And I believe my image there is of me dressed as a shopkeeper from Mr. Ben, with my husband as Mr. Ben, which was a 70s cartoon. I shaved my head for
Excellent.
charity at the time. So
Oh, wow.
I had to find a costume that could accommodate a bald head and was from the 1970s. So that narrowed it down a lot.
Wow,
So,
that is some feat in itself.
yeah, yeah.
That's
Um,
impressive.
but yeah, that's where I am on Instagram.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for giving up your time today to come and chat to me. It's been really lovely.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed the chat. It's been really fun. Thank you for having me.